All right, hello. Welcome to the Modern Thought Room. My name is Jethro. This episode is going to be about speed and how individuals, professional individuals, and the teams that they are part of and the larger organizations they're part of can often misinterpret what speed means and, in their own context, not benefit from the value of speed and having that as a core aspect of how they do business. We all know it is important in business to do things with an urgency so that you don't get left behind, right? But at the same time, context by context, the benefit of speed can vary when you look at the long term. Okay. So we're going to take a look at a couple of things that I think contribute to this sort of like myth about speed and how just making some adjustments to how we think about speed in a professional context could help bring about long term impacts or improvements. All right. So, um, right. If you're in a business, you have a sense, you know that speed is important, right? How quickly you do things, how quickly things move hand to hand, from hand to hand. And that's not something that is a brand new concept, right? But what it looks like on the day to day is something that varies widely across organizations. And even though there is that difference, something that is sort of inherent or true or present that folks, I think, sometimes neglect to really speak on or address or try to address is the roadblocks that lay ahead down the road from any decision that needs to be made that slows down the overall development or trajectory of a decision that initially was pressured to be made quickly. Right. So you're part of a team, somebody above you comes and says, hey, this needs to be, I need this by tomorrow. You go rush, work extra hours, get it done for them by tomorrow. It goes from hand to 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 hand. And then 2 weeks later, it's finally out of the door, out of the organization's hands. And that's not necessarily a problem, right? Depending on your context, if it is a problem, that's something that can, for the most part, usually be fixed. I'm gonna say this really quickly, but a lot of times that can be fixed just by giving by entrusting folks, right? Giving folks the empowering them, giving them the confidence to make decisions so they don't have to wait. But that's very, context specific. But in general, having those um different markers before something finally leaves the company's hand, overall is safe, sound, and good practice, right? So a lot of times I'm going to be discussing things and I'm going to have a take on it, but I don't at all ever reject the understanding or notion that structure is very important and structure, by and large, is for our protection. When structure isn't innovated, then you run into problems. So if you are loving the structure that you have, but it's causing problems and people are asking to change, make changes and to do things to innovate the processes and they aren't being heard, then that's a problem to the structure. That structure needs to be reevaluated. But again, we're going to talk about speed. So what's the purpose of speed, right? It's to stay ahead of your competition, and also stay ahead of yourself or your identity or the identity of the product or the identity of the organization, right? So staying ahead of, again, external, internal, right? It's also so that you don't fall behind, which leads to inability to compete and consequences for being able to move forward, or in a financial sense, um, what's a good word for that? In a financial sense, you can kind of lag. I mean, I'll use the word lag financially, right? Um, okay, so let me back that up because Struggling to get that word lag just threw me off. All right. One, purposes of speed: stay ahead externally, internally. Also, purpose of speed is to not fall behind, struggling to compete as an organization, as an individual, and then also lagging financially, right? And that could look like a couple of things. That could look like a plateau. That could look like a decline. That could look like, not meeting goals that are set higher than where they were, and therefore you're not able to reach them, right? So that part could vary. So those are some of the different reasons why teams, individuals realize in business that there is a need for speed, because there's a preservation that needs to happen, and there's also a gain that needs to occur. So again, speed, very important. Now, at the same time, if you're an individual, you need to be cognizant, right, of how is my push for speed in this context that I'm working, how is that stunting my growth personally, right? You don't want to ever just be doing something to get stuff done quickly and not slowing down to understand how it's impacting your own professional development. Because your professional development is something that sticks with you regardless of what organization you're at or whatever endeavor you strive to bring to life, right? So that's always important. And then as a team, right, you want to make sure that you're producing the best quality stuff over time with a consistency, and that folks are also growing. There is a responsibility of a group to make sure all those that are part of that group are still growing and getting to a place where they're not just achieving their potential, but always moving their potential up, getting there, moving their potential up again. So it's very important. We all know speed is very important, right? Now, one of the things about speed that is, because I have a bit of a background in education and market research, something that I notice, and I want to say this as a disclaimer, so people don't, misinterpret or misapply what I'm going to say next. Depending on what industry you are in, speed may be the whole thing, right? But if you're not in that context and you gather what I'm going to say, then it is for you. But if you're in a context where you genuinely believe speed is the be all end all right, keep it pushing, adios. But if you think that, yes, speed is a critical part of how we do business, but it's not the be all end all, because there are other things, other factors, other aspects that determine how successful we are as individuals in our field, and then as and also what determines it for us as a group, right? So one of the things is understanding what I'm going to say demand is in a broad sense. And then in a more specific sense, I say what consumer demand is. Understanding what the demand really is something that puts to question speed, usually when something shows up as being unsuccessful or not meeting a certain goal or target. At that point, it's a lot easier to see that something went wrong, right? And what does that usually rely on? What does that usually mean? At some point, we misunderstood something or ran on the wrong assumption or some other circumstance you have, right? So it's important that we make sure what we're striving to attack, right, is the right thing based on the steps we're going to take also. Now, a key aspect of this, and this is again as a individual and also within a group or team, for a professional sort of enterprise or business or company or what have you, right? Um, One of the things is or let me not say one of the things that's going to sound varied. I'll say this. One of the most important things is that you understand that you control the identity and narrative. If you don't understand that you control the identity and narrative, you already lost the plot. And somebody's not going to tell you you lost the plot until something doesn't work. And then they tell you, hey, it didn't work. We need to fix this. You lost the plot somewhere. Right. But a lot of people, and myself included, all of us included, can easily forget that we control, or we have a certain degree of agency in the development of an identity or a narrative or plot, right? Sometimes we lose that. We lose understand like, hey, we are the ones that are actually steering this ship, not consumers, right? Not blog posts, not etc. review. They are the ones that stamp whether something was successful or not, but they are not necessarily the originators and or should not be given the place of originator, I guess, right? So that's a tricky thing because it's a chicken or the egg type of thing, right? Decision is made, people react well, spend a lot of money, okay, their need has been met. But is it that their need has been met just solely because they had a need, or did we manufacture a need for them by presenting them this offer, right? Depending on your context, you know which applies more for your situation, right? But I think it's fair to say, it's safe to say that we've definitely had moments where we had to step back and like, whoa, I'm losing the plot. I feel like I'm losing control of the narrative and the direction that changes are happening in. Am I now on the back foot? Things are coming to me. I have to make changes, or am I still front footed about things? And I think organizations have to always still remember that. Businesses have to still remember that. Teams, individuals have to still remember that. Even if something does not go your way or as intended, even if you have data, insights, evidence, proofs, everything still can be recalibrated in a forward thinking way that, you know, maybe you just stretch out the timeline a little bit, right? But whatever you need to do to regain control so things don't just, you know, flop out of control is very important. And speed is a part of this. And I'll use I use a more social context or a personal context to kind of illustrate this. So maybe you want to I'll use this actually because I actually need to lose some weight myself. Say you want to lose weight, right? This is a great one. Right? I think everyone could agree with this. You want to lose weight, and in your mind you see, whoa, somebody lost 40 pounds in 3 months. I need to do that. I need to drop that. Right. So now you're like, okay, what steps do I need to take in order to do that? Right. Because now you have taken that other person's 4 month window or 3 month window, whatever I just said, 3 month or 4 month window to lose the 40 pounds, and you have applied it to your context. And for a lot of people, that's often a mistake that leads to crashing out and not accomplishing weight based goals, right? So you start 2 weeks in, making good progress, then something goes left in your circumstance, and now you unravel, and now it looks like, wow, it's going to take me 6 months instead. Joke's on you. It might have taken six. It might have really been supposed to take 6 months for your context in general. Like it might have actually, that's probably what you needed to aim for in the beginning, was probably 6 months, right? You had to assess your situation. Hey, I got a spouse, I got kids, I got this, I got that, I got this activity, I got this responsibility. And maybe I might not be able to do the same thing as that person that's single, living by themselves and able to make these types of sacrifices, right? And I think a lot of like fitness coaches tell people that, right? They, you know, you hear like different depending on, you know, who you consume information from. They might be like, hey, these diets work, but at the same time, you really need to use the diet or the plan that matches your lifestyle and your system. And they say that to the truth because your context will always have such a will apply such a pressure on the strategies, campaigns, goals, ambitions, objectives that you have, that if you don't give it fair respect, you'll mess around and find yourself stumbling and fumbling and time will be passing. So the gym context, health context, getting in shape context is one of the ways that I think all of us see this happening clearly. Is just, hey, well, I think we set the wrong time frame for this. Maybe we shouldn't have thought we need to rush and do all of this in 3 to 4 months. This might be a 1 to 2 year type of thing, right? Now in business, it's different. You um, maybe might be in a place where you feel like you're not able to, um, you know, apply a certain type of influence to make a narrative come to life. If you're in a bigger organization, some massive organizations, the hierarchy, the structure in there, it's not really your vision, right? But if you have a smaller organization, you have a smaller team, and folks can contribute and align on the identity and the objectives and maybe the products or the services or the offerings that are going to go live, then you do have to ask yourself, okay, who's running the ship, who's steering, and based on that, what's our true timetable? What are we really working with, right? Are we working with something that we need to provide education for first so that folks can actually warm up to the concept before we go ahead? Or is it something that everybody's ready for? We need to go live with it. We need to start making this shift now. We need to make these changes immediately because everyone's already ready for it. So there's a lot of questions you can ask, a lot of different scenarios that could play out. But the main thing I just want to kind of bring back into focus and get us to kind of remember to slow down and think about is, how are we perceiving speed in our context, and how are we making sure that we are giving respect to the need for speed in business, but we are still understanding that in many cases our control over the narrative and identity of whatever we want to benefit from is often more important, and the thing that we need to prioritize structuring or providing a timeline for ahead of just a rush for doing things very quickly, right? So we're going to take a look. We're going to talk a little bit about AI for this too, because this is something that's current and something we all just need to be mindful of, right? So AI, right? It needs to be incorporated, and it still needs to also be incorporated and understood in a context of what's going on. Now, this one I'm going to actually start with on an individual level first, right? If you're somebody, you're working somewhere and they tell you you need to become AI literate, that is true. You need to be AI literate and you need to be able to use AI to help do things more efficiently. That's not a lie. They're not asking you something that's false, right? What needs to happen though, from your perspective, is you need to recognize, yes, I need to go ahead and maybe pivot to start incorporating AI more, but I also need to understand the bigger picture in how I want to steer the ship, right? How I want to steer the ship. What was my original objective for working here? What was my original objective for taking this role? What was my original objective for contributing in this way? What was my original objective for sacrificing these hours? What was my original objective for going back to school? What was my original objective for connecting, networking with these types of people? What was my original objective, right? AI will come alongside of that. If AI is coming in and now you're throwing away your original objective, I can't speak exactly to your situation, but what I could say is, I might need to take a pause to reevaluate what the potential outcomes of that could be, right? AI comes in as a tool. You're like, good, I need to make these changes. But if now you feel like you're off course, you're confused, what do I do now about my career, blah, 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 that's a sign that you might need to reevaluate how you're moving towards your core objectives and goals as a professional individual. That will have a very profound impact on decisions you make and what you are able to contribute to your team at large. All right. So, professionals, individuals, go ahead. People are telling you, get better with AI, do it. At the same time, though, make sure that you keep or develop if you didn't have it. Some of us are working and don't actually have goals or objectives. That's not an exaggeration. Some of us are literally going to work because we have to. We like life would just be difficult if we didn't, but we don't necessarily have long-term objectives and goals. And if that is you, get a piece of paper, go open a chat bot, and then start trying to work through it. And again, that's something that you can take 5-10 minutes a day to just chat with the AI bot, write down some stuff on a piece of paper. This is a whole separate video that I'm going to make at some point. Is the value of conversations. I'm somebody that I do like to do a lot of deep thinking without noise, but I do verbally process a good amount. Um, Conversations, the wealth that exists in conversation, it's almost a tragedy. It's almost a tragedy to see how many people struggle to have conversation or maintain conversation. So conversation is an episode I'll make at some point. It's not going to be tomorrow. Maybe it might be tomorrow. Let me not lie. I hope I make that, Lord willing. Um, that's a. Let me not get sidetracked, but that's a huge thing. Conversation's a huge thing. Um, so yeah, make sure with the AI stuff that you have some objectives that you're working towards, because yes, you go and quickly apply it, you quickly go and adapt AI, going off of the speed of the urgency that's provided externally, pressure on you, and 6 months down the line, something happens. Now you find yourself back at square one, not having already kind of built in sort of contingencies because you sat down and thought things through. Anybody that sits down and thinks things through will always see where potential conflicts could be. And even though you cannot avoid them, being aware of them and having one or two contingencies in place will help you out tremendously. And I think that's not like a new thing. That's just a thing we always need to be put in remembrance of, because life is, very fast paced. We got a lot going on. There's a demand on us, and it's easy to get stuck doing and reduce the amount of thinking that we're doing. All right. So adaptation, right, of AI, make sure you're doing it. Make sure though that you're also forecasting for yourself a broader vision, um, so that you can protect yourself, safeguard your future, and be able to see when it's your opportunity to move, when it's your opportunity to strike, when it's your opportunity to create, when it's your opportunity to delegate, etc. Right. So a lot of businesses are going to be fine, and I think I'm more so speaking to businesses of decent size. They make a good amount of money already. They have a product that people do need on a, like it's a actual, they produce something that is of a certain particular service that is very much in high demand. So folks will survive. Folks will get better with AI. Those things will happen. And it is, those are things that will happen very quickly. But as I mentioned in another video, there is going to be a post AI era. We don't know what that'll look like, but we probably should start charting it out. Um, Not charting it out because it will end up looking like that, but charting it out so that we can already start thinking about how we need to make some adjustments. All right, so business is going to do well, but there are going to be some businesses that move too quickly with AI and run into some hurdles, run into some obstacles, run into some issues that cause immediate problems. If you got a stockpile of cash and you could go and fumble through AI right now, great. Some organizations, they don't have that, and they need to be more mindful about how quickly they adapt to AI. Now, this is something that people need to sit down assess their context and say, all right, what is the most immediate way we can implement AI that does not throw us off course or potentially introduce more obstacles for us in this short term, right? But how do we then safeguard against the future where our competitors are going to have already sort of ingrained AI into their systems? What will be the thing that differentiates all of these companies that are AI backed, right? That answering that for your context would just help you understand and recalibrate what speed you need to move at with AI integration today. If the answer you guys do that and the answer is like, man, we might just be out of business. Well, y'all need to, it's tough. You know, I said at the beginning of the video, context is context. That speed might be real important to you. And then some people it might not be. And it might be important for you to uh, double down on core brand. There's a word for this, core brand. Ooh, this is not an expression, but there's a better expression for it. I hope you guys find it. But core brand identity markers. There's a much more polished way to say that, but brand identity markers, things that make your brand, your product, your service, in whatever context it is. There's something that makes you, you, and that needs to be developed in the same frame as AI is being developed in your context. So, gonna keep harping on that. So, I think that's good. So, remember, as you're getting influenced to integrate AI, that you are also forecasting the future. I could have probably just said that at the beginning and just cut out some of the extra stuff, but forecast the future as you adapt to AI, and always be assessing what speed means in your context, right? So that you aren't finding yourself in a place where you're repeating steps, repeating cycles because things were done in haste. Haste makes waste is a expression, and it's an expression for good reason. Yes, we know in business speed is very important, and in some industries it is the thing. So this is not a message to just everybody's context. If it applies to your context and you find benefit from it, drop a comment, leave a comment there, so that other folks can kind of chime in too as well. Thank you again for your time. Appreciate you. Adios. Ciao. Bye bye.